What if I told you that one of the most powerful forces shaping your decisions isn't logic, isn't intelligence, isn't experience, and isn't even your own opinion? Instead, it may be something far more subtle, something happening around you every single day. The opinions of other people. Think about it. A restaurant suddenly becomes popular, and more people want to eat there. A video receives millions of views, and even more people click on it. A product becomes a bestseller. A trend goes viral. A political idea gains momentum. A rumor spreads through a community. And somehow, the more people believe something, the more likely others are to believe it too. But why? Why do humans often feel safer agreeing with the majority? Why can standing alone feel uncomfortable, even when we believe we're right? Why do people sometimes change their opinions, simply because everyone around them thinks differently? And why have some of history's greatest mistakes and greatest achievements both been driven by the same psychological force? Tonight, we are exploring one of the most fascinating mysteries of human behavior, a story involving evolution, survival, belonging, conformity, social pressure, identity, and the invisible influence of the crowd. This is the story of why humans follow majority opinions. To understand this behavior, we must travel far back in time, long before cities, long before nations, long before the internet. Imagine a small group of humans living tens of thousands of years ago. Life was difficult. Danger existed everywhere. Predators, disease, starvation, harsh environments. Under those conditions, survival depended heavily on cooperation. A single person alone was vulnerable. A group was stronger. The group could hunt together, protect one another, share information, raise children, solve problems. And because belonging to the group was so important, the human brain evolved to value social acceptance. Being accepted increased your chances of survival. Being rejected could be dangerous, sometimes fatal. As a result, our ancestors developed an extraordinary sensitivity to social signals. They paid attention to what others believed, what others valued, what others approved of. And over thousands of generations, that tendency became deeply embedded within the human mind. Even today, your brain still carries those ancient instincts. Part of you still wants to belong. Part of you still wants acceptance. Part of you still notices when your opinion differs from everyone else's. And that is where the story begins. Because following the majority often feels safe. Imagine you're walking through a forest with 10 other people. Suddenly, everyone starts running in the same direction. You don't know why. You haven't seen any danger. You haven't heard anything unusual. But chances are, you start running too. Why? Because if 10 people noticed something threatening, ignoring them could be risky. In situations like this, following the crowd can be a smart survival strategy. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as informational social influence. When we are uncertain, we often look to other people for clues about reality. We assume they may know something we don't. And often, they do. Imagine visiting a foreign country. You arrive at a busy train station. You aren't sure which platform to use. What do many people do? They look at what everyone else is doing. If hundreds of people are walking in one direction, it feels reasonable to assume they're heading somewhere important. The crowd becomes information, a shortcut for decision-making. And most of the time, this works remarkably well. The problem is, the same system that helps us make good decisions can also lead us astray. Because crowds are not always correct. Sometimes entire groups can be mistaken. And this brings us to one of the most famous psychological experiments ever conducted. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch performed a series of studies that revealed something extraordinary. Participants entered a room with several other people. They were shown a simple task: a line on one card and 3 comparison lines on another. The answer was obvious. One line clearly matched. Anyone could see it. But there was a twist. Everyone else in the room was secretly working with the researchers. And they intentionally gave the wrong answer, again and again. The real participants suddenly faced a dilemma: trust their own eyes or agree with the group. Remarkably, many people chose the group, even when the answer was clearly wrong. Not because they couldn't see reality, but because standing alone felt uncomfortable. The experiment revealed something profound. Humans are influenced not only by facts, but by social consensus. When enough people believe something, it begins to feel more believable, even if evidence suggests otherwise. But why does this happen? Part of the answer lies in belonging. Humans are deeply social creatures. We want connection, acceptance, friendship, community, and agreement often strengthens those bonds. Imagine being in a room where everyone shares the same opinion. Then imagine expressing a completely different view. What happens? You may feel tension, awkwardness, anxiety, the possibility of disagreement, perhaps even rejection. The brain notices these possibilities immediately. Because for thousands of years, social harmony carried tremendous value. This creates something psychologists call normative social influence. Sometimes people agree with the majority, not because they truly believe it, but because they want to avoid conflict. They want acceptance. They want harmony. They want to fit in. And often, they may not even realize this is happening. Now, let's talk about something even more powerful: the fear of isolation. Imagine expressing an unpopular opinion online. Within minutes, people criticize you, argue with you, mock you, attack your viewpoint. For many individuals, this experience feels emotionally painful. Not because disagreement is inherently dangerous, but because humans evolved to take social rejection seriously. Research has shown that social rejection activates some of the same brain regions involved in physical pain. In other words, being excluded doesn't merely feel unpleasant. The brain treats it as a meaningful threat. And because of this, many people remain silent when they disagree with the majority. Not because they lack opinions, but because speaking up carries social risk. This phenomenon has been observed throughout history. People often assume everyone agrees with the dominant view, simply because dissenting voices remain quiet. As a result, the majority can appear larger than it actually is. But conformity is not always negative. In fact, civilization depends on a certain amount of conformity. Think about traffic laws, language, social etiquette, public safety rules. Shared norms make cooperation possible. Imagine if everyone invented their own driving rules. Roads would become chaos. In many situations, following collective agreements benefits everyone. The challenge is knowing when conformity is helpful and when independent thinking becomes necessary. Now consider another fascinating aspect of human psychology. The brain loves efficiency. Thinking carefully requires energy. Analyzing information takes effort. Questioning assumptions takes time. But agreeing with the majority is often easier. If millions of people recommend a book, it feels safer to assume it's worth reading. If everyone around you praises a product, you may trust their judgment. This tendency is known as social proof, the idea that people often determine what is correct by observing what others believe or do. Social proof is everywhere. Online reviews, ratings, follower counts, bestseller lists, trending topics, view counts. The modern world constantly shows us what other people are thinking, and those signals influence us more than we realize. Imagine two restaurants. One is completely empty. The other has a line stretching outside. Which one seems more appealing? Most people feel drawn toward the busy restaurant. The crowd itself becomes evidence that something valuable might exist there, even if we know nothing else. But there is a danger hidden within this system, because popularity and truth are not always the same thing. History provides many examples. At various points, majorities believed the Earth was the center of the universe. Majorities accepted harmful stereotypes. Majorities resisted scientific discoveries. Majorities opposed social changes that later became widely accepted. If truth were determined by popularity, many important advances would never have happened. This reveals a crucial lesson. The majority can be useful. The majority can be wise. The majority can provide valuable information. But the majority is not automatically correct. And this is where courage becomes important. Throughout history, progress has often begun with individuals willing to think differently. Scientists questioning accepted theories, inventors pursuing unusual ideas, artists creating new styles, activists challenging social norms, entrepreneurs exploring unfamiliar paths. At first, many of these people stood alone. Their ideas seemed strange, unpopular, even foolish. But eventually, some changed the world. Not because they ignored everyone else, but because they were willing to think independently when evidence required it. Interestingly, humans often admire this quality. We celebrate innovators, visionaries, trailblazers, people who dared to challenge the crowd. Yet when facing social pressure ourselves, independence can feel much harder. Because admiration from a distance and courage in the moment are not the same thing. There is another reason majority opinions feel persuasive: confidence. When many people agree on something, their collective certainty creates a powerful impression, even if the evidence is weak. Humans often mistake confidence for accuracy. If enough people repeat an idea, it begins to feel familiar, and familiarity creates comfort. This effect is sometimes called the illusory truth effect. The more often we hear a statement, the more believable it can become. Not necessarily because it is true, but because it feels familiar. This is one reason misinformation can spread so effectively. Repeated messages become psychologically persuasive, especially when many people appear to support them. Yet there is something remarkable about human beings. We are capable of both conformity and independence. We can follow groups, but we can also question them. We can seek belonging, but we can also seek truth. The challenge is balancing these two instincts, because both serve important purposes. Without belonging, people become isolated. Without independent thinking, people become trapped by collective mistakes. Wisdom often lies somewhere in between. Listening to others, learning from others, respecting collective knowledge, while still thinking critically, still asking questions, still examining evidence, still being willing to disagree when necessary. Perhaps this is one of the most important skills a person can develop: the ability to stand with the crowd when the crowd is right, and stand apart from the crowd when conscience or evidence demands it. Because in the end, humans follow majority opinions for a very simple reason. For most of our history, other people helped us survive. The crowd represented safety, knowledge, protection, belonging. And those instincts remain inside us today. But the modern world requires something more. Not blind conformity, not stubborn independence, but thoughtful judgment. The ability to listen without surrendering your mind, to belong without losing yourself, to learn from others without abandoning reason. Because sometimes the crowd sees something you don't, and sometimes you see something the crowd doesn't. And perhaps true wisdom is knowing the difference. Because every generation faces the same challenge, not merely deciding what everyone else believes, but deciding what they themselves believe. And that decision has the power to shape the future.